Good morning, everybody. We joining in today for another edition. I know. First of all, let me say Happy New Year to everybody because we haven't had a show since the holidays. We pray and hope that you all have fabulous holidays. We hope that you guys are also had a fabulous New Year, and we're looking forward to starting off this new year in a tremendous fashion. And we're kicking it off with something. I know we had left off the last time we talked. We were talking about deployed and being away from home and those kind of things as a soldier. But now we're going to go to the next phase in the chapter. This is something that has really been going on in the military culture for a long period of time. But with the pandemic and with so many other things that are really showing exposure or giving exposure to the mental health aspect of it, it's not so much that we're talking about the PTSD, but it's all the phenomenon of what the mental health is and how it's being managed and what we can do to help with the resources wise and also the availability of resources to our military service people. But I don't do this show by myself. I got the wonderful vet, Mr. Air Force himself, Charlson Gaines, joining me today. What's up, man? How you feeling today, man?
I'm
Happy,
good. I'm good. Happy New
happy.
Year.
Yes, man. We excuse me. We talking about that. Just that managing mental health in the military community, man, and how it's one of those things that I know when people talk about mental health, especially when you talk about the military community, right? The first thing jumps out at people's, or the first thing that people are comfortable with saying or addressing that with is, oh, PTSD, right? They throw everything in the PTSD category, right? And then not only that, with the misconception of that and the misunderstanding, and a lot of times the misinterpretation of what that is, a lot of people go from that extreme to like, oh, they got PTSD, they crazy. You got to watch out for them. They might. So it's just so many wrongs, man, to this argument, so to speak. And we just want to talk about it, man. We jump right into it. In managing mental health, man, how have you seen that to be, I don't know, maybe an issue or even just with the relatability of soldiers trying to actually talk about what's going on with their mental health?
When I think about managing mental health on active duty, I feel like the culture just isn't set up well. And what I mean by that is there's so many resources, right? So if you're having issues, there's the chaplain, there's the wing psychologist or maybe the battalion psychologist in the army or whatever. There's other people who can go to your first sergeant. So there's all these different people that you can go to for help, but there's not enough emphasis on you managing your own mental health.
Yeah.
And so kind of creates a culture of tough it up, tough it out, stay strong, hold on, hang in there, go ask for help before you die. Like there's no in between. There's no in between where you can figure out this is how I'm feeling. Do I need help or not? What is going on with me? How do I elevate my happiness? And so we don't teach those skills the right way so that people can literally manage their mental health.
Yeah, it's becoming it's becoming a thing when we're talking about the mental health and we're talking about what can be done and how it can be done. Because when you talk about the military personnel, right, we start thinking about those tremendous qualities such as bravery, but we start thinking about all of those. And I wouldn't say dramatic because I'm a veteran as well, so I know they come with the territory. But a lot of times they are really uh, unjustly tied because they are humans as well. I know we've came along and we've been in the service and we understand what we signed up for and all of that goes along with talking about it. But when you think about it, and I think I got a stat, man, and it said about I think it said about 30% of the military troops, mostly on active duty or in the reserve, that's whether they're deployed or even not deployed, or have some kind of mental health issues that need to be addressed. And with the culture of how it is, and with the culture of, and I fought the military for that as well. so to speak, because they have to have this sort of mantra of, yo, we the tough guys, right? But along with being the tough guys, there's a job, and then there's the casualty of the job. There's there's the collateral damage, as we say in the military, right? Yeah, I got the job taken care of, but yeah, maybe a few people, got wounded, injured, or got died, or got killed in the process. But the objective was met. How do we kind of frame that where I'm managing this mental health while staying in the capacity of being this elite soldier serving in the military? How do you think we're going to be able to kind of like balance that?
Well, I think the foundation of balancing that is really, allowing these soldiers to just spend more time and effort, looking at themselves, right? And I say that because when I say looking at yourself, I'm thinking about what you have in your head regarding what it means to be a soldier, right? So you're a hero, you're brave. Look at all the Avengers movies. Where did you see someone that was scared? Like, oh, heroes ain't scared, but they're comic book characters. We're real and we're not scared. First we run towards the fight. And so the culture is set up so that you do that to yourself. Regardless of what anyone else does, you think to yourself, I have to be brave. My family looks at me like a hero. I have to be strong. But we can take the same messaging and apply it to mental health. And I'll talk about the Air Force core values, right? So one of them is integrity first. Let's apply integrity to assessing our mental health. Am I struggling or not? Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
Service before self. Well, if providing service to others is so important, I have to make sure that I'm able to do that. I have to manage my mental health so that I can provide, the services. So
That's true.
basically, so I can do the job.
Yeah.
And then the last one is excellence in all we do. Be excellent in taking care of yourself. And so really, I think the foundation is empowering people to understand where they're at in regards to their mental and emotional health, and then giving them the tools to do more for themselves. It's like either you go to mental health or go to the chaplain or you're fine. There's no in between.
Yeah, and with that not being no in between, it's a hard road. It's a hard road to bear with soldiers being there. And then not only that, the stigma. Let's talk about this stigma for a bit. I, the stigma of it, and it's all kind of like rolled up into this like one enormous kind of thing, right? The stigma of it is what we already know, and what we know as veterans is. Um, you got to be tough, like you said. Suck it up. Embrace the suck. All of those kind of all those kind of sayings or cliches that we're used to hearing, or that spewed at us, even from the time we get off the bus ride to the training base, right? When the drill sergeant get on the bus, I don't know how they did in the Air Force, man. We got to I got to Fort what was I think it was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, because I was a tanker, man, and we pulled up to the base and we all just sitting there, just talking and just shooting the breeze. And the next thing you know, man, we pull up to the base and we see these drill sergeants, these big old hats, and they just hop on the bus, man. And from there, our bus ride went from 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds. Like they get out the bus, get out. Where you smiling at? Who you talking about? Man, they just was hollering. It was about four of them, man. Just hopped on the bus and just started hollering out and I was like, they had us in a state of shock, man. So they already fortify you with that inner toughness, and you see that throughout the course of your training. But there's a mental block that happens with that as well, because you're taking these soldiers from different areas and different perspectives and different lifestyles, different mannerisms, different characteristics, and you're all trying to mold them into this one fighting machine. And there's a lot of mental lag and a lot of mental weight that comes along with that. And why do you think that we haven't got to the point of saying uh, there needs to be some in between there? Why do you think that's been overlooked for such a long period of time? Even if the soldier knew to take it in his own, why do you think that it hasn't really been pushed at, or maybe it has? Has it really been pushed at? Okay, I know we got to do some balancing here. We can't go from 0 to 60. Or you either crazy or gonna jump off the deep end, or you're fine. What do you think they're working at toward getting that balance?
Well, a big part of it, I think, is there's a couple different things. First of all, I know that the last organization I was with had different programs that were, say, the in between programs, but people don't want to. They don't want to go there. They don't want to do that because of the stigma, like you mentioned. The idea of, well, if we're going to be part of this fighting force, are we also a force that's always asking for help? And
Yeah.
so a lot of times it's the stigma we place on ourselves. And what we have to do is really to take ownership of our mental health, to be able to assess it. And when I think about that, I think about the way that we do our PT tests, right? Our physical training tests. What kind of shape are you in? That's quantified, all the services.
Yeah.
What did you score? I can ask you, what did you score on your PT test? And you can give me a number and I know where you're at. But we don't do that for mental health. And of course we can't, because mental health isn't the same, right? But people don't know where they stand in regards to their own mental health.
Yeah.
And so they don't know when to ask for help.
Yeah. They don't know. They don't know when to ask for help, and they're like uncertain to ask for help. So many other things that comes to mind when you talk about the mental health, because it's so broad, it's so wide, statistically wise. It's really kind of hard to narrow down causes and effects in each and every individual, right? Because we all deal with things differently, and there's facades that everyone puts up, regardless of the situation that they're in. But what are some of the things that's moving forward, and even in offering that, even with your services and what you offer, and directing those kind of things? Uh, how does the future look for the military and managing mental health? Should I ask?
I'll tell you, I think it looks good. I think it looks good. And I know I'm just saying this based on what I've seen from the Air Force,
Mhm.
and just knowing that a lot of these organizations work together at the highest levels at the Pentagon, right? So, like, I doubt the Air Force has all of these great projects coming up, and the other services aren't doing anything. I'll tell you this: a report just came out, I think, in the last week or so, about the number of suicides in the Army. I believe it doubled or something. I'm not really sure though about the numbers. And so, with the Air Force, I see a lot of different things going on where they're more focused on mental health, but they're more focused on people taking care of themselves. And I like that, but you have to get the buy-in. You have to get the buy-in from the people. And that's often difficult with the older generation. The ones that say, when I was a corporal, when I was a senior airman, we didn't have that. And I came out fine. Look at me. These guys
Yeah.
are all weak, blah, blah, blah. And you think, to be a good leader, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be empathetic, you have to be a good listener, you have to buy into these programs, and then that's how you get people to buy into you, right? Some leaders want you to buy into certain things and then they trash other things, and it's like, no, I buy into you. So we have this new mental health program, and I want you guys to take advantage because I want you guys to be okay. An example, I know the Air Force has one thing they're talking about is this program where within larger units they will embed certain personnel, like a chaplain or a psychologist or a licensed clinical social worker. So they'll be embedded within the unit so that the individuals within that unit feel a stronger connection to those people. So basically, so they don't feel like they're talking to strangers. And so that's one initiative I've seen that I think has a lot of promise. But the way the military works is these programs take years to implement.
And they're on a scale of really trying to get those things, and I wouldn't necessarily say the pressure. Um, but what I was doing, and doing some reading, I put a fact in there, and this is something that I found when I was just doing some reading about this topic. And this is mental disorders, but they're saying that the Department of Defense, you automatically disqualified from serving in the U.S. military if you have a current diagnosis, right, or a history of most mental disorders. And I know mental health and disorders, like there's a borderline and there's a lot of differences that comes along with that for us, certain things that you're really diagnosed with. But when you're talking about the mental health and well-being of individual soldiers, here that you have a policy that's framework where you won't have them in. They kind of like you can't serve with that. But here the actuality of it is you have a lot of soldiers that are dealing with mental issues currently serving, and how are we addressing those that are currently serving with that? And I know we talked about before, we've talked about it a couple of times on the show, where we talk about the resources and the things that's available to them. But how do you think that is coming about with the encouragement to use these resources? Because even though things are there, people still have to feel comfortable with going to utilize the things that are there, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to feel comfortable in order to be vulnerable. You mentioned that, that's my favorite term. Be vulnerable and opening up. But how does that happen when you're conducively in a culture that doesn't really want you to be vulnerable? That pretty much shuns the very appearance of vulnerability. How
Well,
are we working to get across those divides?
well, here's the thing: the leader sets the culture, and so what happens is, starting at the top, you can have, the chief of staff or the ranking enlisted person. For the Air Force, the chief master sergeant of the Air Force, the command sergeant major, um, and these guys, they can be all about mental health. They can be all about seeking out the services, so on and so on. But it trickles down from there. And so maybe then the installation commander agrees. Maybe your battalion commander agrees. Your wing commander agrees, right? Well, then you get down to the squadron commander, and they disagree. The squadron commander tells you that's a bunch of wimpy stuff. That's a bunch of weakness. You got to toughen up. Then it doesn't matter what the chief of staff said. It doesn't matter what the secretary of defense said about mental health. Your commander says you're weak if you got to go see someone once every couple weeks. And so that discourages you. So you don't even bring it up. And so really the leadership has to set the culture. And I'll give you an example of someone who missed an opportunity. I was a part of this event, this activity going on where we were interviewing people who were closely associated with individuals who died by suicide. And there was one individual who had a high level of responsibility. He was a commander, and it destroyed him inside. Like he was hurt, he was struggling, he felt horrible about it, right? As leaders do. When leaders lose someone to suicide, they do feel horrible about it. But what happened with this individual was he lost confidence in his ability to lead. He felt guilty for the way he handled things after the suicide, but he didn't go get help. No one in his unit knew that he was struggling. So while he went around and talked to other people and said, "Hey, make sure you get help," and then you have the post suicide. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but they come into the unit to make sure everyone's okay.
Yeah.
If the commander says, "Hey, I need help," that shows the entire organization that it's okay to ask for help. So the leader sets the culture.
Now, with the leader setting the culture, now that's easier said than done, right? Because now you
Yes.
have, and this is just so much that particularly that I'm just fighting for and working for, and just talking about vulnerability and being vulnerability in leadership. Because the first drawback or the first fight back or bark back to that is that, okay, you're the leader. How in the world, um, or are you going to take a stance as being vulnerable, and the misunderstanding, the misconception, and the misinterpretation of being vulnerable, which the narrative is what I really like to say when I'm talking about it. The narrative of vulnerability and where it lies is so essential to us understanding what vulnerability is, but it's also detrimental to us being effective in being vulnerable, because you can being vulnerable doesn't lessen or take away any of the tools, trades, skills, qualifications, characteristics that you have, and it's just been meshed together, married together so indifferently as an understanding, as we understand it, as people understand it, is that it doesn't get the recognition that it deserves. And a lot of times, we're not getting the recognition that it deserves. It causes an issue or problem with those that feel that way, and they're ostracized for feeling that way. The military has been, they've had the monopoly on ostracization, right? And I can say that freely because they have. They ostracize you from your family during training. You know, I mean, you can't talk and call and all of that, right? Everything that you learn, and not to say this is bad. So I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. I don't, because we do need this for what we are in and for what we're doing. But when we're talking about the mental health aspect of this, there has to be some barriers that are broken down where people can feel okay about going to get help, because we are advertised and we're glorified. Yo, well, we got resources all over the place. It's almost like, diversity and inclusion. Hey, what do you mean we're not hiring diversity? I got a whole lot of diverse people working here. What do you mean? Okay, well, are they included? It's just the same thing with the military. I got a lot of resources here for you guys to go. And man, you talk to therapists, psychiatrists, whatever kids you want to talk to, right? But are they making it where it's comfortable too? And what do you think are ways? I want to ask you that. What ways you think that we can really, even us who are having this show and some of the things that we can bring up and talk about, what ways do you think we can use that to be effective in giving people the courage to manage their mental health uh, in this military community?
I think it starts with the messaging, right? What message are we putting out there? And it needs to come from the commanders, right? I'm not talking about some commercial. I'm not talking about some message from the Pentagon. I'm talking about from your commander. And the messaging needs to be, first of all, that vulnerability is a strength and you can't have courage without fear. Like it's not courageous to do something that doesn't scare you. It is not courageous to put your shoes on. It's not courageous to go get a meal. It doesn't scare you. It didn't take courage. And vulnerability is a strength because really what happens when you're vulnerable and you recognize certain things within yourself that need fixing and you open up, you're being brave because you're doing something uncomfortable to solve a problem. And so the messaging has to come from the top. And there's different ways to do it. I've seen commanders talk about some of their life experiences and the help that they got. So your troops don't need to see you sitting in the waiting room waiting for your therapist. They don't need to see that, right? Not that it's a bad thing if they see it. What I'm saying is that's not the goal. But when you have a commander's call or something and you talk about that, you say, whether it's we suffered a miscarriage in my family, or when my father died, or it could be anything. When my family member got COVID, I was really scared, and although my family member survived, I had a hard time dealing with stuff, so I had to see someone. So just to tell these stories, like there's a time where I was hurt, I was scared, I chose vulnerability, and it enabled me to resolve my issues. And you should do the same, regardless of what your issues are. And I'm gonna tell you something else. So this is not really the same topic, but involving sexual assault, where I would give these presentations and I would speak on sexual assault prevention. And one of the questions was, about people getting help and the way that they're ostracized and there's retaliation. And the commander stood up. The commander interrupted me. He said, I apologize for interrupting, but I just need everyone to know this right now as your commander. You have my full support when you need help. And if anyone gets in your way of getting help, let me know. I will handle it. If commanders make that statement about mental health to the entire organization, then that opens up the doors. That lets you know, hey, you know what? My boss went and got help. He fully supports me getting help. I don't have to wait until I'm suicidal.
Yeah, you don't have to wait. And then there's an encouragement factor that goes along with that as well, because you touched on a key point of that. when it comes from, and a lot of people may not know the structure in corporate, right? Where you have that immediate supervisor, manager, or even the leader of particular groups or departments, right? When they're not giving you the necessary respect or guidance or leadership that you're yearning for, you desire, uh, you can go a step above them, right? And for the most part, you know, I'm not, I haven't worked in every corporation, so I can't say a generalization of that. But for the most part, if my supervisor, it's I'm having issues with, I can go above them and I can kind of let that information be known, and there could be some repercussion to that supervisor or some reprimand or something, you know, whatever that higher up depends on. But it's such a tricky it's a maneuver when you're in the military, right? Because first and foremost, the power is within the rank you hold. So even if I'm a private, a PFC, a specialist, a captain, yes, there is someone above me that I can go to, or there's someone above who's ever over me. But the most important part that I think gets missed if you're not military, there's no backing up in that situation. Because if the colonel go tell a, or the captain go tell the colonel, more the times than not, they're going to side on something together that's going to influence what happens to you beneath the, and that's how the rank go. Because I have not been in too many situations where I went to my maybe my second lieutenant and told him, you know, about me being a staff sergeant, look, I don't think this is going too well with this here. And they say, well, we're going to do that anyway. First and foremost, I can't go back and forth because that puts me in being subordinate, right?
Yeah.
There's so so I can't do that. But I may not agree with it 100%, or I may have some objectivity to what we're being able to be seen or done. I can't just go over to second lieutenant and go to my first lieutenant and be like, "Oh, I talked to second lieutenant. I don't think we should be doing that." Because first and foremost, it's not going to be looked upon as a great thing, and I'm not going to be looked upon as a team player. So the encouragement of what you said, as far as the leader, the head guy getting up there and said, "Look, regardless of what's ever going on, this is how I feel. This is how I feel with you guys leading." How can we encourage the leaders to do that? What steps can we take to encourage the leaders to say, "I got to see what's for the benefit of my people that I'm leading," and we can put this across all, I'd say genres for lack of a better word. We can put this upon all industries in leadership. This could be a platform or a prototype to say, you know, it's okay for leaders to say, you know, this is how we're doing this.
You know what I think about is a lot of people have a certain rank or position and they're afraid to do something outside of that. So a lot of them are afraid to say, this is my stance. These are my boundaries, these are my standards, because they want to give themselves some leeway, right? But what has to happen is that they have to allow people to know where they stand. And what they need to do is build real relationships. And what I mean is empathetic leadership, really getting to know people. So what happens is there are times where you're thinking, I want to go speak to the commander. I want to go up the chain, something like that, right? And then there's this fear. Well, what happens if I talk to the captain? Am I going to get in trouble? Is it going to come back to bite me? What's going to happen? But when you have real relationships based on empathy, based on support, based on encouragement, then we can remove that fear. And I'll give you an example of that. I worked for a guy, and I'll say his name because he was one of the best leaders that I've ever worked for. His name is Colonel Jason Lamb. And if you went above your supervisor and you went to him with the problem, you knew two things were going to happen. You knew that he was going to listen to you, and you knew that his response was going to be objective. He's going to take in the information and he's going to assess the information. And if you were wrong about, like, maybe you shouldn't have come to him, maybe you should have given your supervisor another chance to resolve it or whatever, he'll tell you that too. But if you know it's fair, you know it's objective, and you know where he stands, you didn't have to worry about Colonel Lamb coming back and retaliating against you. So he removed that fear. And when he did that, there were times where his decision went against what you wanted. But his leadership style and the relationship he had with his people made it easier for you to accept why he did not agree with you. Because there was no guarantee he was going to agree with you, but the guarantee was that he was going to listen to you and make the best decision that he could. And I can't say that about all the leaders I've had, but he was one. He was one that really had everybody's back. And that's how you just be a good leader, right? Whether you're a corporal or a young sergeant in charge of a squad, or whether you're a colonel in charge of a commander, in charge of a command, a squadron, or something else, right?
And it takes that courage that we have to really fortify. We have to really make those decisions uh, who we are in that moment, right? Because a lot of times we know who we are, but we fail to, I can say, we fail to operate out of who we are because of the surrounding circumstances. So therefore, we understand our core values. We understand, what makes us tick. But a lot of times, the circumstances surrounding us engulf us, and we say, okay, uh, for lack of a better term, I say, I go along to get along. Now we know how pertinent and essential that is in the military, because there's so many ways that you can get yourself in trouble if you don't, and there's so many ways that you can get yourself in deep trouble. You know what I mean? I never forget when I first got there, the first time that I had a bar fight in uniform after work. We had a couple of guys harassing us, and we took care of business, and the MPs came, and the bar owner was like, "Well, no, they was good soldiers. They was getting harassed or whatever." So it was no charges or anything filed. But when we got back to the barracks, and the MP sat us and talked, because we was just young, just young. So I think I was about 20, young soldiers off the streets of Chicago. You know what I mean? I wasn't taking too much mouth from nobody, but I did. That was my first inclination of how different it is, because it wasn't a fight on the streets where the police come, break it up, and you may get a ticket or a citation or something for, because the people that we were going to fight, they were above our grade. So we were looking at jail time just to having a fight, with these people. And it was not nothing negotiable when the MP told us the charges and what they could have levied against us and all of that. I was extremely shocked. So I was like, you gotta be kidding me, man. We just got into a tussle. It's like, man, he was I think I was because I graduated basic training as an E4 corporal. So when I got out, when I got there, he's like E4. This guy was an E7, sergeant first class, and then the guy with him was a lieutenant. And we was just talking about, we was about to bust these two kids up because they was harassing us. Drunk people at drunk military people. But when the MP talked to us about, and gave us like the death, it was an older MP guy, man. Older, I forget what his rank was, but he was an older gentleman, and he took the time to kind of really explain, because he saw that we were just young guys, just really didn't know, what we were getting into. And I think that's the kind of leadership, even though we wasn't under his command, or we wasn't, he took an approach of saying, okay, these guys need to know this, and they need to understand this. And I think this is how we have to do with this managing mental health. People don't always know this, but we've got to make this so comfortable, and we've got to take this stigma away, uh, that people can feel at ease with coming to say, "Yo, I'm not feeling too good about this here. Where can I get help from?" And this is where we got to go with that. But yeah, man, once he told us, what we could get and how much trouble we could get in and how many years, he was talking about Fort Leavenworth. I was like, really, for a fight? Because we had heard about Fort Leavenworth, right?
Yes.
And nobody wants to go to Fort Leavenworth, right? So I was like, for a fight, really? He's like, yes. He was like, you guys were headed up the river, and he was like, the bad thing about it is, even if you got a jag or someone, they'd have told you to plead out before they'd have helped you win
Yeah.
this case. And I said, that was sad, but that was my first inclination of knowing what kind of community and culture I was really in, you know. So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
wild. But that's the thing is that we gotta have each other's back And just putting on that uniform is a way that we just recognize, okay, we're part of the same team,
Yeah.
you know, and we could be in different career fields, right? You're talking about the difference between, you know, an MP and a, you know, a tank driver or whatever, but it's like we've had a lot of the same struggles, you know, both in the army at the same time, going through the same kind of stuff. So it's like, you know what? I see a person first before I see, you know, what you've done or what rules you violated. And a lot of what has to happen is more frontline supervisors need to be empowered to make those decisions.
Yeah.
I saw one time where this individual was dealing with a lot of stress, and this individual failed their PT test. Didn't run fast enough. I think missed it by, you know, 12 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever. Um and so the supervisor knew what this guy was going through. The supervisor knew there was a lot of stress, there a lot of stuff going on outside of work. And the supervisor talked to him and said, "Look, you know, let's talk about it." And the supervisor dug into the mental health. Let's talk about ways to manage your stress, ways to manage your emotion. Let's come up with a plan to get you on track so that you can pass it according to the regs. You can retake it in 45 days. So the supervisor set all that up. Then the first sergeant says to the supervisor, in a separate conversation, "Are you not going to give this person written counseling, a letter of counseling?" And she said, "No, I'm not." And the first sergeant said, "Well, that's what we do here." And the supervisor said, "If it's in writing, I'll do it because I'm not going to violate any policies or established standards. But if it's not in writing, then I, as a supervisor, have the choice and I'm not going to write this person up." It's hard to have that kind of courage as a supervisor. But in this situation, the supervisor and the first sergeant were both E7s, they're both master sergeants. But if you're an E5, if you're a staff sergeant, and the first sergeant says you need to write them up, then they're going to.
Yeah.
They're not empowered to take caring for their people to another level. And so we need to allow them to make the decisions. We need to allow, you know, E5s and E6s to tell the E1s and E2s it's okay if you come in late because whatever's going on, because you had car trouble, because something going on with your family, because something going on back home got you stressed. You know, we got to get away from this culture where either you go see the chaplain or the psychiatrist or you come to work. You know, the E6 should be able to say, "Yo, just come in a little later. You know, just chill out, just relax this morning, just take some time to get your head together." We need to empower more people to take care of more people.
Yeah, I think that's really across the board when you think about just the different arenas of dealing with the military and dealing with that, and a lot of times we have that. Well, not a lot of times. Actually, I could just about say 100% of the times, those kind of things aren't given to those. I would say those first level. And I want to see my man Alex is here. Appreciate him coming through. Alex, what's going on, bro?
Hey, how you guys doing? Thank you guys for having me out. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
No problem, Alex. This is Charlson. This is
Charlson.
Air Force vet. Alex, man, tell the people a little bit about you, man. And we're talking about managing mental health, but just tell a little bit the audience about you and your service and what you bring to our table.
Okay. So still in the U.S. Air Force. I'm a leadership instructor right now. And then when I'm not doing that, I volunteer heavily in the military transition space. And back in 2018, I had a couple of people that were working for me who transitioned, and their transitions were terrible. So I sat down and kind of asked myself, hey, how can I prevent this failure in the future? And I just set off on my journey out into the nonprofit space. And we all know the nonprofit space is crazy. There's, approximately 50,000 VSOs that are out there. And there's just so much noise in the space. So my personal mission is just to be able to help people in a way that is clear, concise, and actionable, and just eliminate that confusion that I know that I experienced when I was out there trying to research for those guys. And that's essentially me. Carl, thank you for having me. Charlson, it is nice to meet you, sir, and glad to see another Air Force vet out there, because Army is out here dominating everywhere.
Well, we didn't dominate the Army Navy game.
Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah.
dominate that. But look, Alex, we're talking about this managing mental health, and me and Charles have been having a good conversation about it. What have you really seen, seeing that you're still active, because most of us are out,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still active? How are you seeing that military vets are really getting the resources that they need? Because I know it's a lot of resources out there,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you see the culture is as far as them taking advantage of these resources?
In terms of taking advantage of the resources that are out there, I still think that there's some stigma that's attached to seeking mental health support. You know, I mean, whether it's on post or whether it's off post, I think that stigma is still there. I always ask all of the NCOs that come through the course, hey, what is y'all's stance on mental health? Are you guys making sure that you educate your soldiers or sailors, your airmen, you know, your Marines and stuff like that? Let them know that there is support out there. And one thing that we do is we compile a list of resources that are non-DoD affiliated, that are either low cost or no cost. And then we compile those, and then we make sure to send them out. Because I would much rather somebody, you know, reach out to, you know, an organization like Give an Hour or something like that, so then they can at least talk to somebody. You know, if talking to their peer, talking to their friend is not enough. But I mean, you know, even speaking to somebody that you're close with is still a step in the right direction, because you know, you're acknowledging that, hey, something is upsetting me, and that's totally okay. You just gotta get the strength to go out there and talk to somebody, and then once you talk to somebody close, then pick you out a resource that best fits your needs and your personality. So that's what we're trying to do, because I know that it's a big cultural shift in the military, whether it's bravado or, you know, just ignoring issues. I'm not sure which one is more prevalent, but I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we share resources, the better stuff is going to be for everybody.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. When you're talking about uh, what's understanding and what's out there, and when you're just talking about it in general, when you're talking about managing, it's such a broad spectrum of different things you have to manage. I know me and Charles was talking earlier. We're talking about most people that are not in the military or not have been exposed to this culture. It's a great culture. Don't get me wrong. This is not a bash in military culture at all. I am so very proud of my service and of my country and what we have been able to be as a unit of men and women, just bravely serving in some tumultuous times, during some tumultuous situations, right? And it hasn't always been the best. We haven't always been pushed into these best situations, but we've always came out on top, and I'm proud to be a part of that community. And when we look back on those that have served and have now, I'm in New Jersey. I'm up on the East Coast, and I mean, when I go down to the cities, I run into a lot of military men or vets that have gotten out that, it's such a shame, and it's such a, when you look at them and the things that they're suffering through and the inability to articulate what's really wrong with them and how can I get this help when the stigma is still there. Some of these vets that I've talked to, even though they've been out for years, they still carry that proudness of, like, I don't want anyone to look at me, in any kind of form or fashion. How can we kind of fight that stigma, us as being in the service, serving the service, out of the service, trying to care for those? Charleston, what do you think? Like, how can we kind of like do something encouraging with that? And Alex, and I'll let you weigh in on that as well.
Well, I think a big part of breaking this stigma of seeking help for mental health is really one thing that you can do is just change the messaging so that people can learn to align, positive mental health, like being healthy mentally and emotionally, helps you be a better airman, helps you be a better soldier. Because we do that all the time with physical health, right? What kind of soldier are you if you can't do this many push-ups? What kind of soldier are you if you can't run this fast? What kind of airman are you if you look like this in uniform? And so that is congruent with being a good soldier, being a good Marine, airman, sailor, is being in good physical condition. But with mental health, we don't do that. So we need to associate getting mental health help with being a good airman. You cannot perform at an optimal level if you're bringing depression, if you're bringing anxiety to work. And the truth is, we're not going to judge you for that. We're going to applaud you doing what you can to get help. The same way that we applaud people, they show up to PT 3 times a week, but guess what? They also have a gym membership. They're also taking a martial arts class. They're also doing this other stuff. And it's all for physical health. And that's great. We applaud that. But then with mental health, it's like it's not the same. It's not the same where it's like, oh, I'm glad that you are proactively going to these meetings. I'm glad that you're proactively taking these emotional intelligence classes, these resilience classes, right? Some organizations we get, you'll get an hour and a half or an hour 3 times a week to go work out. But where's the time built in for your mental health? And so when we prioritize it like that, like, man, oh, you scored 100 on your PT test, that's amazing. I should be able to turn around and look at someone else and say, I know you're struggling with this, but now you're not, and that's amazing. And even as supervisors, as leaders, to say, I know you went through this, 6 months ago. I know you went through this 8 months ago. And as you got help, your performance has increased greatly. And I'm so glad, I'm so grateful that you had the strength to go get help. We can completely redo the messaging. And then that creates a culture where it's like, oh, y'all celebrating Charlson for getting help with his depression? Maybe I should go get help with mine. Simple as that.
Yeah, it makes some great points on that, Alex. What you think about that, man? Some of those things that you probably could have and be operating in right now where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just embracing the fact that no one is perfect and no one is a machine is going to be the first step. I know that very early in my career, we were kind of expected to be robots. Nothing was ever supposed to bother us. Adverse weather conditions, like it didn't matter. We were supposed to just be out there straight faced. And I think that part of the culture is what kind of bleeds over into the mental health aspect too. Because like if you're going through something, like just ignore it. Don't let anybody see weakness. And I think part of that culture bled over from the high operations tempo. Because some of the NCOs, senior NCOs, and even the company grade officers, they were deploying, at least once a year, if not more, and they were gone 6 to 8 months, 9 months even, and they were doing that over and over and over again. And maybe they just didn't have time for it, or maybe they didn't want to have time for it. But I do remember that having a lasting impact on me as a leader in my earlier years. But now I'm just like, hey, you know what? Like, we're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect. I mean, we can strive to perform at the highest level. But it was like a great example that Charlson just said was with physical training, right? If you get injured out there, you're going to go to physical therapy. You're going to go see the doctor. You're going to go through rehabilitation process in order to get that body part back up to an optimal performance level. So, why wouldn't you do that for your emotional health as well?
Yeah, you make good points on that. I believe that there's 3 reasons, or at least 3 that I've kind of like thought of. Maybe not even 3, just conversation wise. I think the first it's psychological. Um, it's an idea of like a psychological weakness in the military culture because it fights so much against what the military ethos is of like strength and invulnerability, right? We're this uh, mound of strength, and which we truly are. We're looked upon as these champions of, and I think Charlson gave a good analogy of that talking earlier about the superhero mantra. And even now, so if you just look at the superheroes now, I remember when I was a kid looking at them, and they was under the you were under the idea of like nothing can harm them. You know, Superman, bullets bounce off, this kind of thing, right? Even if you look at some of the movies of the superheroes now today, the Black Panther, like Iron Man actually dying, like I mean the those kind of things, X Men getting killed, like they're trying to take that moral compass away from saying that everybody's not invincible. And I think though we do have a job to do. There is some stability that has to be there in the military. There has to be that fortitude. There has to be that, we can't quit. It's not a win or go home kind of thing. We got that's understood, but we got to have some kind of underlining there for those that are, because I know in the military, you guys can probably attest to this as well. When I was in the military, back in the early '80s, uh, when guys wasn't passing their physical exams, like they was a toast and a roast of the unit, right? And I mean, we didn't care about hurting feelings. I mean, because that was kind of like preached to us, like they were singled out. And when I look back on that in life now, even a few years after basic training AIT and developing the skills that I needed for my position, I kind of played a lot of that in my mind. I was like, yo, that was the same as like bullying a kid in high school who didn't make the team. You know what I mean? And I had a lot of guys, man, that when we had, I don't know, both of you guys are Air Force guys were in the Army. We had the bell in the middle of the facility and training. And if you wanted to quit or you wanted to give up or you couldn't face no more the basic training or whatever, you had to go ring that bell so the whole place knew that you had failed, that you had quit, that you was not going to continue on. And I think that was kind of like a highlight to us. When I look back on it, I was like, oh man, that was kind of wrong what we were doing. Like we were really alienating people that were different, and it had nothing to do with black, white, yellow, brown. It wasn't even a skin color thing. It was like weak and strong. Like we considered a lot of people weak because they couldn't do 50 push-ups or they couldn't do the 2 mile run, and those kind of things. And how are we going to be able to change that kind of thinking now? Because it still goes on. I don't think I was watching the other night. A Few Good Men and the Code Red. I think that's kind of stuff still goes on where leaders still have that kind of thinking, especially older ones have that kind of thinking of, yeah, 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 it's a said, but it ain't said. We're gonna take care of that guy. We're not having no weak guys in our unit. What you guys kind of think about that dynamic?
Yeah, I would 100% agree that probably does exist. I'm sure that it still exists too. The one thing that I try to remind myself is it's a generational thing, and I think right now with us exiting from global war on terror, there's gonna be a big generational flip, and practicing a little bit of empathy, I feel like will reduce that frustration because you're like, hey, like these guys are a product of their environment, just like pretty much everybody else is, and just acknowledging that, like we use that as a discussion point now, where it's like, hey, like you just have to remember where these people are coming from, and then once you can do that, then you can take a step forward in understanding them.
That's definitely key. Oh man, we've had a great talk, man. I appreciate you, Alex, coming in, man, and let the people know. I'm gonna put your information out here so we can connect with you, man. But tell us, man, before we close out, what do you got going on? How can, besides LinkedIn, people get in touch with you? Some of the services that you offer, because I'm never one that says there's a shameless plug. I think anything that anybody is doing for the betterment of other people should be told to people. I don't believe in this. Oh man, you're a shameless plug. You're gonna plug your stuff. I want you to plug your stuff, man. Let people know where they can find you. What good you're doing, and how they can get involved and support you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Connecting with me on LinkedIn or following me on LinkedIn. If you fancy a follow versus a connection, go ahead and do that. I'm also on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. I just created a link tree. I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn here soon because evidently, like, Linktree is like a one-stop shop where people can get all of your links. If you guys don't have one already, you got to hook one of those up. But what I focus in is brand strategy because early in my career on LinkedIn coming in, I was told often to just go out there and create a personal brand. And I had no idea what that meant. And then after hundreds of informational interviews and taking some certification courses, I was able to get really clear on the difference in between an optimized profile and then a brand, and then the brand from the content. Like those are those three pieces that you're going to need in order to build that personal brand that you probably have envisioned up there. So I help people take that vision and then put it in executable steps so they can use it on social media.
Awesome, man. Awesome, yeah. That was the same thing that I ran into as well. Being in corporate for so many years, I had no identity what a personal brand was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a good thing that you're doing. I appreciate that. All right, Charlson, man, what's going on? What do you got going on, man, for the people?
Well, thanks for having me, man. I love doing this on Wednesdays and addressing these topics. I'm Charlson Gaines. I'm an emotional intelligence life coach, and really I help people to use emotional intelligence to learn to love themselves and feel whole again. And one thing I want people in the military to understand is that if you're struggling with mental health, that makes you normal. That's common. What a lot of people in the military don't understand is over 80% of people in the military have had at least one adverse childhood experience, and over 45% have had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. So what that means is that when you get to basic training, you're already dealing with things. You're already struggling. So many people join the military to be fixed, to get stronger. And what happens is you get to a point where you realize there's some things I got to fix on my own. And like we're talking about with stigma, you don't want to ask everyone for help because you don't realize that other people need help too. And so what I do is I offer you a way to help yourself with emotional intelligence, positive psychology. I have a couple things going on like group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and I just started a membership community. And within the membership community, I offer a Slack channel where people can get to know each other and build real support, real relationships. There's also a weekly newsletter. It comes out every Friday. And also within Slack, I have a room that's called office hours. And what happens in the office hours is you can drop your questions, anything about mental health. And then I go live on Zoom every Friday and I answer those questions. And so you have direct access to me every week through this. And it's only $17.99 a month. And for direct access, I also have different classes that are in there, some micro classes, as well as I'm going to build some comprehensive classes in there. I'm also going to provide a lot of empirical data, right? Access to actual mental health peer-reviewed journal articles so that you can see the science behind what I'm talking about. So I really want it to be comprehensive because we need more people to be able to assess where they're at mentally and emotionally and begin to heal themselves.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for coming by, man. Look forward to us having a discussion. Alex, you're welcome anytime, man. Anytime that you want to come by, man, and drop some of that knowledge on us and giving the opportunity for coming out and sharing that perspective. I know we talk to some old head vets who not in anymore. You bringing that live perspective of still being in. That's something that is really more powerful than our perspective, because we're talking from a history of just being in and out. But you're right there in the battle. You're right there in the front line, so to speak, and you're understanding the everyday process of those soldiers that you're seeing, and some of the things that they're going through, and some of the military, and how the military culture is, and it's not a dynamic of bashing, like I said before. It's just it's a different animal, and that's about the best way to put it. The military culture is a different animal, and everybody ain't built for it. I know that's much Jill started to say when I got out the bus. He's like, all of y'all ain't built for this. And I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of y'all gonna ring that bell, and a lot of y'all ain't gonna complete these 16 weeks. So, he told us the truth, and the truth is what it was. But I think that we've come a long way. We've made a lot of progress, and we got a lot of things that we're doing now to make this community much more viable than it's been. Man, we appreciate you guys. You guys can check me out and check out my page as well. I talk about vulnerability and leadership. I also got a training program that we got classes starting monthly. There's 4 weeks. This class is intensive. We talk to you about being vulnerable, how to be vulnerable, how to embrace your vulnerability, how to do it in leadership, and how to create safe spaces, because a lot of people are fearful of being vulnerable because the spaces aren't there. And we're teaching executives and leaders how to create those spaces so your workforce can be innovative, they can be productive, they can be excited about delivering for you. The objective is for them to deliver for you. And this is where we want to create that space for them, man. So I appreciate you gentlemen coming out. You guys, I appreciate everybody that came and checked us out live. We definitely have it on hashtag replay. You go and check it out. Add your comments in. Tell us what you think about the discussions. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We love all of what you're doing, and we hope to expand this show, looking at adding some more people on, some more discussions. We're going to be just addressing the military culture, exactly what the show says, and we're just going to be talking about it from your point of view, getting your point of view, the military soldiers, and letting them in on your point, your perspective, what we can talk about and what we can make better. Thanks, Alex, man. I appreciate it, man, taking out the time. Thanks again, Charlson. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks, everybody that came by. Have a great week, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.